Good afternoon, everyone. So today I'm just going to talk you through basically what I've been doing over the last year as part of my master's research, which is looking at how we can explore the feasibility of serious games designed with an MDA framework for the application within healthcare. So to sort of introduce what it's been doing, my foundation research sort of summarised like the variety of game design frameworks and and the inclusion of cognition in games that were available as part of the foundation research. Today I'll just sort of highlight one specific part of it, which is the definition of what is a game and what is a serious game. Then I would like to quickly talk about Brainplay, which is a tablet-based set of games that I designed from a cognitive psychology domain. And then finally, I'd just like to ask the question to what's next. But before all that, I'd just like to talk about the motivation really surrounding cognitive impairment, which wanted to look at the research not just from my personal interest in serious games development and my interest in exploring the possible applications of games into different genres and markets, but because cognitive impairment is something quite close to home for me, as it is for many people, I'm sure. Myself personally, my grandma suffers from a really severe form of dementia, and I would like to think that games can provide maybe a therapy or maybe some sort of distraction for the distress that is sometimes caused from people with dementia. Mild cognitive impairment is not just limited to dementia either. There's obviously a number of illnesses and disabilities that lead to cognitive impairment, and understanding how it's designed for the cognitive impaired individuals feels like an important direction for the study. Oops, I've gone the wrong way. So yeah, to talk about where I began, it became like a lot of back and forth, and then I looked at there's not really a consensus on what is a game and what is a serious game. So I've just given two examples on the screen, one from Bernard Suits, which is quite a favourite of mine, which is the voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles, which is basically the whole kind of encompassing of the engagement of a video game. But then serious games have had this whole non-consensus on what a serious game is, which is flowing into what will be my follow-up in my my PhD work. So this formed the basis of clarifying what I wanted my game to be, and I wanted the prototype to be somewhere in the middle, something that was basically remain a game but carry meaningful purpose through possible application and mild cognitive impairment. This gap is sort of the basis for the research, and basically investigating whether Brainplay, which is the prototype I developed, could be used for assessment, diagnosis, training, or recreation. Because of all we've heard from today and yesterday, the brain training assessment is a lot of things about brain training, a lot of things about cognitive assessment, but more globally, I'm looking to try and see what other areas can we move into in healthcare. So now I know the experience I wanted to create. However, I wanted to provide a method for creating video games for mild cognitive impairment. And this is where I conducted a literature review into the game design frameworks that are available. And as you can see illustrated on the screen, I opted for the mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics framework. When this framework helped me create the mechanics for specific cognitive domains. From there, I was able to realize that there was actually a very limited amount of literature between GameWorks for creating cognition in games. So just to flesh out the bit of details, on the screen now is the cognitive domains I chose to design the 3 games from. Obviously, working memory is quite well associated with dementia. Thinking and reasoning is a predominant executive function alongside working memory, and language has been associated with learning difficulties as well as speech and dyslexia has been spoken before. These 3 games were collectively used to form the collective prototype, which is Brainplay. So on this, I've gone the wrong way again. On the screen now is Brainplay. It's a tablet-based prototype I've made in a couple of months, and it's specifically just to go out and test my basis of the research. I'm currently conducting experiments into the user experience of Brainplay using a hedonic motivation acceptance model to observe how people are engaging with it. So does it retain its elements of being a video game? I'm then speaking to UK health professionals to say where do they believe that games should really belong. Do they need it for assessment? Is it something for diagnosis? Or is it something that's just a distraction tool? And I'm in the process of doing that now. This kind of brings me to my final points of what's kind of next. So there's a lot of discussion around the validity of games for cognition, as you've heard from other presenters, as well as the whole conference, really. A recent Polygon feature discussed the University of San Francisco and Neuroscape and their development of digital medicine. These are movements out there that are trying to these are movements that are trying to develop help with cognitive impairment, but I believe as game developers we need to develop upon existing design pathways and frameworks that are for serious purposes like cognitive impairment. There's a lot of recycling of knowledge where they're constantly suggesting new frameworks, when I feel that we should use the frameworks that are there to develop pathways for games. On top of that, we need to know where these games are needed and who are they needed for. Do we need games for assessment or diagnosis, or even as a form of therapy? Finally, if we as game developers can provide a method for including cognition in game development, we might be able to adopt this in a commercial entertainment industry, leading to what I believe is a healthy experience of playing games. May I finally just say thank you for listening, and thank you for Games for Change for having me here. If any of you have any questions or want to come look at the prototype that I have on my tablet with me, feel free to grab me at any point over the festival. Thank you.